The line has gone all the way around. It's now going out the door.
I'm okay with that.
I'm so close! Good times.
Yeah.
Yay! Yeah, just good times.
Good times indeed.
Good times.
We're going to need everybody to condense in and make friends with their neighbors, say hi. You're all here because you like Bernie, so like talk to each other. And I'm also going to ask you to take a seat when you can because we need to get an idea of how many people are in here. So please condense and then take your seat so that we can make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to come in. Sound good?
Woo! So my question is, if they fill this place and they really, it's definitive on where that line is drawn, do they just keep us like sitting here for hours, or?
Probably. Because when's Bernie gonna get here? We don't know if he's here yet.
That's true. Did you ever watch Community?
No.
Watch it, but they leave him waiting, and the whole experiment is to see like when you break. So the analogy, the metaphor that I was going for there is wouldn't that be hilarious? But I have that sense of humor, so. That guy was right behind me at the rally. The one with the Bernie. The guy with the Bernie poster.
No.
It's like literally right behind me.
There's no exceptions. Everyone needs to scooch over, including VIP, including ADA in that second row. You all need. There should be no space. So if there are seats open next to you, we're not saving seats for anybody because they're probably not making it in at this point. So please push together. Okay?
Woo!
I see open seats. Those need to be closed. We're outside.
I'm Bernie Sanders and I approve this message.
Confederate side renaming Columbus Day Native American Day.
Oh, for sure.
You know, why do they honor Columbus on Columbus Day?
All of those monuments were taken down. Any Columbus monument,
But the other thing, and this is the way I felt with the Confederate flag, is, you know, history doesn't have to be good. You know, they said take the Confederate flag down. I said, okay, take it down, fold it up, put it in a glass case in the station.
Yes.
So we never forget what the hell we did.
Right. I agree.
You know, I mean,
100% agree.
but you know, the other thing is like the Confederates, you have to, at a very basic level, they stood up and they fought for what they believed in. And that's honorable. What they believed in was ridiculous. But they fought for what they believed in. I saw a picture yesterday on Facebook of a Confederate, a little Confederate.
Hello, everybody. Can you feel the burn? Can you feel the burn? You're gonna learn. You gotta feel the burn, huh? We won Albany, New York. Detroit. We won Schenectady. We won Amsterdam. We won by big numbers because Bernie is our president. And it wasn't just me. It was everybody in that front row here that worked on that campaign, that registered students, that went door to door, that did the phone that those are the people, our delegates, our elected officials, we all stay standing on the front row. And everybody that chipped in, and we set records in Albany. But to get to it, you know, you don't want to listen to me. I'm the one with the bullhorn. I admit it. I was out on the CWA picket line, and there is a picket line out here. This going on right now at Honeywell. So if you could stop out in Cohoes and join that picket line with folks like Bernie, he joined the CWA picket line, and that's important that we support our brothers and sisters in the union movement. They got locked out in Honeywell, in Green Island. So if you go by there, honk your horn, give them some support. They're still locked out and scabs are working in the plant. So without further ado, I know, scabs, that's what we got in America. One of the worst things that no other country in the world will allow. No other industrial country in the world will allow scabs to work in your employment. Period. This is it. Without further ado, I want to introduce everybody, and it's my pleasure, believe me, to introduce you to Senator Bernie Sanders.
Introduction, and let me thank all of you for coming out on such short notice. A wonderful turnout for me. Thank you. What I wanted to do today is just chat with you. And first of all, let me begin by saying thank you very much. We won Albany County. hundreds of thousands of volunteers in every state in the country, and I know that many of our volunteers are here this afternoon, so thank you for all that you have done. I think what I want to talk about today is something that most politicians don't talk about, and that is politics in the very broad, long-term approach. And that is, I think everybody here knows that real change in our country never, ever, ever has come about from the top on down. It has always come about from the bottom on up. Sometimes that change comes amazingly rapidly against impossible odds, and sometimes it takes a long, long time. But I just want you to reflect for a moment about real change. Think about the fact that 100+ years ago, workers in this country had no protection at all. They were totally at the mercy of their employers. Children were working in factories, losing fingers and hands, being around machinery they should not have been around. Kids were in fields all over this country. What happened? Working people stood up and they fought back, and they created trade union movements, which gave some power to working people. And that was an enormous step forward. And in fact, the trade union movement helped create the modern American middle class. And think about the civil rights movement. And think about all of the struggles for so many years that entailed. I'm older than most of you. I can remember, because I was involved in this debate. This struggle, segregated, the United States lived in an apartheid society. We don't use that word. We refer that to South Africa. But what do you think was going on in this country in the 40s and the 50s? It was apartheid. And yet incredibly brave African Americans and their allies stood up. We don't know the number of people who died in that struggle, were beaten and went to jail. It took a long, long time to make the kind of progress that we have made in overcoming racism in America. Think about the women's struggle. Do you know that 100 years ago today, women did not have the right to vote? I mean, you tell that to the little kids, they think you're crazy. Women could not get the education they wanted. They could not go out and get the jobs they wanted. When I was mayor of Burlington in the 1980s, we appointed the first woman police officer. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal. You had the gay rights movement. You know what kind of struggle was involved in that? The kind of bigotry and hatred and homophobia that had to be overcome, and is still, we're struggling with right now. We're struggling with today. I saw that with my own eyes. What's my point? My point is that struggle and victory is not easy. We got to keep going. And what this campaign has accomplished is just opening up the doors to a process that must continue. And that's why I'm here. I am, like every human being, and especially being a senator. Senators have notoriously big egos. I'm a senator, so I plead guilty. But it really is nice, as I look out and I see all the Bernie t-shirts, I gotta tell you something, it's not Bernie, it's you. It's you. Bernie can't do it alone, and by definition, that's not what it's about. It's not about Bernie or anybody else. It is about people coming together in a democratic way to transform this country. Yes. That's what this is all about. Now I want to tell you, because it is what you have done, and what we have done together. Everything is an us. It's not a me, it's not a you, it is an us. And this is what we accomplished together. When we began the campaign, we were an asterisk. We were not considered to be a serious campaign. And yet we have ended up winning 13 million votes. We won 22 states and caucuses, and we lost 4 or 5 by less than 2 points. And we had to compete in many states like New York State with absolutely regressive and outdated election practices, which in this state meant that 3 million people who were not registered as Democrats and Republicans could not participate in the primary, which is to me totally absurd and something we're going to change. A number of points that I want to get across to you, but I don't want anybody here to think that you are brave and courageous and heroic radicals, because you're not. The ideas that we are talking about have become mainstream ideas.
Yes.
They are the ideas, in fact, supported by the Here's something else that should give a great source of satisfaction and optimism to everybody here today. And that is the way it turned out. I would not have predicted this. I really would not have when we began the campaign. It turns out that in every state and in every primary and in every caucus, we won, and sometimes by unbelievably large numbers, the young people's vote. By young people, it's not the 20-year-olds or the 25, that's people 45 years of age or younger. So when you're 20 years of age, you think that 45 is not young. Your perspective will change when you are 45. In fact, those of you remember Dick Van Dyke?
Yes.
Dick is a great guy, and he campaigned with us out in California. He's 90 years old. He's as spry as can be. I said, what a dynamic young man. He's only 90 years old. But anyhow, this is the serious point. And it's, everybody understands this. We did terribly, and I don't know why. Maybe we could have done better among older people, 65 years of age or older. But we won overwhelmingly among the younger people. What does that tell you? It tells you...
Future.
That's right. Tells you that our vision, our ideas of economic and social and environmental and racial justice is the future of this country. If we stay at it. Other thing, if we could turn down those lights a little bit, that would be great. What we also did is we engaged the American people in a way that is unprecedented in modern American history. We held rallies where we spoke to over 1.5 million people. 1.5 million people. As volunteers, you were among hundreds of thousands. You know how many telephone calls we made during this campaign? 75 million telephone calls. Probably ran up a pretty big phone bill, but what's the point? The point is that when people become engaged, incredible things can happen. Our people, volunteers, knocked on 5 million doors. We held 74,000 meetings in every state in this country. And we rewrote the book on campaign fundraising. millionaires and a super PAC. Not quite true. What we learned, and again, it's not something I would have necessarily believed could have happened, is if you have an agenda that speaks to the needs of ordinary people will kick in and help. And one of the things, it was an article that I actually couldn't even read because it was so moving to me. I think it was out in the LA Times, they wrote this, somebody analyzed, I don't know how they do this, who our campaign contributors were. It turns out that a majority of them were below the median income. In other words, I mean, that's really extraordinary. It's one thing to say you get $27 on average. It's another thing to know that a majority of your contributors are below are in the bottom half of the income of people in this country. And that was just incredibly moving. But it does tell you that if you are prepared to stand up and fight and bring people together, it is amazing what people will do. We got money from people living on $10,000 a year Social Security, people unemployed. So the point is, when you stand up, good things can happen. And what are the issues? One of the things that I think turns off the American people from politics, and what I'm here really to talk about is how we engage people in the political process. I've got 7 very beautiful grandchildren who I love very much, and I got 4 great kids, and you have family and kids and grandchildren. We have got to make sure that we leave these kids a world that is healthy and that is habitable. It's a good world. And we can't do it by allowing other people to make the decisions for us. We have got to make those decisions for ourselves. Goes on, and one of the reasons that people get so turned off to politics is all they hear is one candidate ripping apart the next candidate. You know, I'm great, the other person is terrible, and so forth and so on. And nobody is engaging people in terms of the issues that they are experiencing in their lives. And that's what good politics is about. Good politics is when you're talking to people, people start nodding their heads. And they say, yeah, that's right, that's what my uncle is doing, that's what my kid is experiencing, that's what I'm experiencing. So I think one of the things that we have to do is to really go deep and not let media do this. Media, in this sense, as most of you know, corporate media is owned by large corporations.
Yes.
They have their agenda.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, with some exceptions, their agenda is not to really allow serious discussion around serious issues. There's a conflict of interest there. And our job, therefore, is to decide what the issues are and figure out how we can communicate. And by the way, another reason we did so well with young people is we did fantastically well in social media. That is a tool that is available to all of us. We can communicate directly with people. We have, I don't even know how many millions of people we know on various lists. All right, but what we have got to determine, if we're not going to be typical politicians who go around saying, I'm great, my opponent is terrible, what are the issues that your neighbors and your friends are concerned about? So let me just tick off a few of them, because I think these are the issues that are moving America. Number one, campaign finance. The current campaign, and I don't want you to get used to this system, because we're going to change the system. Don't let anybody tell you that Citizens United has anything to do with democracy. It is the exact opposite of what a democracy is. So at the top of my list, because it touches on every other issue, is the need not only to overturn Citizens United, but to take it a step further, to do public funding of elections. You know, and by the way, in this area, New York State, is generally speaking a fairly progressive state, but in these areas, New York is way behind other states. Your voter turnout, as I understand it, is historically quite low. I mean, what I could see in the primary process was really, really bad, really creating all kinds of barriers to people participating in the political process. All right? We've got to open it. Yeah, of course we do. And by the way, as we speak right now, literally this moment, in St. Louis, we have 5 great people on the platform committee who are going to fight for a people's platform in the Democratic convention. We're working. But only think about it. California is making some pretty good steps. There are countries around the world where if you are 18 or whatever the voting age may be, you're registered to vote. That's all. Period. End of discussion. All you have to fill out 20 forms. You know, Oregon, California is doing well. They're moving toward universal registration. What Oregon does, you know what Oregon does? They send everybody a paper ballot. And you fill out the ballot, you put it in a box, and you send it back. Their voter registration level is very, very high. Now, you know, what may work for Oregon may not work for New York State, but think about ways to make it as easy for people to participate in the political process as possible. Voting and participating is a right, you know? And here in New York, clearly you've got to knock down a lot of barriers. This idea that to participate in the primary, you have to change your party registration from independent to Democrat or Republican. Was it 6 months before election day? That's totally absurd. And that's a corrupt system. Everybody knows what's going on. That's a system that maintains the established leaders of both parties, I guess. All right, I've got to break that down. And I've got to deal with this whole superdelegate issue as well. So keep up the fight in whatever way makes sense to you to create a democratic form of society. The end goal of that should be the United States having one of the highest rates of voting turnout of any country on earth, not as is currently the case, one of the lowest voting turnout rates. Okay, that is the goal, and we've got to figure out how we get there. In many ways we can do it, but let's focus on creating a democracy. Let's focus on getting big money out of politics. Let's focus. I mean, again, this is something we get used to, but I can tell you that in Congress and the Senate, nobody will disagree with me on this, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. People spend an unbelievable amount of time. You know what they do? They're not working on health care or unemployment or the environment. They're raising money. I am sure that as we speak right now at the Democratic National Committee or Democratic Senate Committee, Democratic House Committee, Republicans, there are people on the phones. You know what it's called? It's called dialing for dollars. What they do is they give you a list of names of wealthy campaign contributors, and you call up and you say, "Hi, I'm Congressman Joe, and I understand you are a Democrat. We'd love to have your support. Can you send me $1,000? People spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing just that. And that's why it's imperative that we move toward public funding of elections so that Congress could be out at meetings like this, hearing what his or her constituents have to say.
Yeah.
Deal with, again, what I was excited about, what I love about this campaign that we're running, is that we're raising issues that people agree with, but which other campaigns never talk about. Pope Francis talks about this. The morality of an economy in which the top 1/10 of 1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Think anybody in America thinks that's a moral economy? Nobody does. It is wrong. It is immoral. This is not a poor country. You know, if we were a poor country, we would have a certain type of discussion. We would say, okay, look, we're really poor. We can't afford good health care, can't afford good infrastructure, can't afford good education. We're poor people. We are not poor people. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But nobody knows that because almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the 1%. This is an issue now. How do you rebuild a disappearing middle class? How do you deal with the word called poverty? Some of you may not have heard of that word because it never appears in campaigns or on television. But poverty, 47 million people in America living in poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. About 21% of our kids, people of color, the numbers are much higher than that. Is that acceptable? No. It's not acceptable. And we can change it. This is not, what I'm telling you, these are not impossible things to do. Public policy can change that. So have the courage. When you go out there and you engage, have the courage to talk about morality as part of politics. And let people who disagree with you tell you why they think it's right, that 58% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. Can you imagine that? Here in Albany, in my state of Vermont, people work 2 or 3 jobs. Everyone's working hard. 58% of all new income is going to the top 1%. Stay on that issue. And we have got to reach the day where people say, this is obscene, this is not what America is supposed to be about, and we're going to change that. Now, the reason we don't talk about poverty is that very few poor people vote. That's all. Poor people spend their lives trying to survive. They're not going to vote. 80% probably of poor people did not vote in the last election in 2014. When you talk about poverty, I was in South Dakota at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Anybody here hear of that? Do you know what the life expectancy is on that reservation? It's 58 years of age, which is what it is in Guatemala. This is a poor third world country right here in the United States of America. Right now in America, in an ahistorical way, unprecedented, there are millions of people who are now dying at ages that are younger than their parents. Do you all know that? In other words, what has always happened in modern history is as healthcare and other things improve, people live longer lives. We now are looking, and the scientists are studying this, social scientists are studying this, in areas where people are unemployed in high levels, often in rural areas, states like Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kentucky, where unemployment is high, where wages are low, where people are seeing a decline in their standard of living. They are turning to opiates and heroin and alcohol and suicide at unbelievably high rates, the result of which is that people's life expectancy is actually going down. We have got to address those issues. Why? What do we do about it? How do you give hope to people so they don't become drug addicted or alcoholic or suicidal? We got to deal with issues like that. There are schools in the United States of America where more of the kids who leave those schools end up in jail than graduate college. That's right. We have got to transform our entire educational system. And implicit in that, and this is not a radical idea, is to make educational opportunity available to all people at all times, regardless of their income. Does anybody think that that is a radical idea?
No.
It really is not. It is good for the economy. Think about what we lose when you don't get the education that you need in order to do the kinds of jobs that are out there. Or do not become the scientists or the engineers or the doctors or the teachers or the police officers that we need. So investing in educational opportunity, thinking big, understanding that in a changing economy, in a globally competitive economy, we need the best educated workforce. That should be a very high goal for us. What about healthcare?
Should be right.
All right. Do we have a healthcare system that is adequate? Raise your hand if you think we do. I don't see a few hands, not very many. Why not? What's wrong with the healthcare system? Raise your hand, raise hands, raise hands. Yes, sir.
Privatized medicine.
Privatized medicine, okay. Yes, ma'am.
High deductibles.
High deductibles.
One more.
All right, 1 second. All right, let's talk about high deductibles. All right, anybody here dealing with deductibles? High deductibles. All right, high copayments. All right, what does that mean? It means that technically you are in the ranks of the insured. You're counted as insured, and yet there are people who have deductibles of $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year. And what that means, in fact, what does it mean if you have a high deductible and no money?
You're not
You don't go to the doctor, right? What happens when you don't go to the doctor? You get sicker. Now this is where this touches on an issue. It's very much like the same issue as criminal justice. And that is, if you don't put money in the front end, you put it 10 times over at the back end. So here's crazy. This is what is crazy. Think about it, all right? Somebody gets sick. They have no health insurance or they have a high deductible. And I've talked to doctors who tell me this all the time. People go crawling into the doctor's office and the doctor says, why didn't you come in here a year ago when you first had your symptoms? Well, doctor, I didn't have any insurance or I had a high deductible. I couldn't afford it. Okay, I'm sending you to the hospital right now. You need major surgery. So he spent $50,000 or $100,000 on what perhaps was preventable and could have been dealt with at a tiny fraction of the cost. This is totally insane from the perspective of human suffering, as well as the cost of the system. So what do other countries have? They say when you get sick, you go to the doctor. What a radical idea that is! Let me tell you again, this is something that the media does not talk about. And one of the reasons for that, and I often get back to the media because the media gives you a sense of the world which is not really the world as it is. If you watch TV, you see a lot of ads from drug companies.
Yes.
Some of those really frightening ads that tell you all the things that happen to you if you take the drug. I don't know why anyone would possibly take that drug. But all of these ads have a huge influence on whether or not the kind of coverage that TV, for example, will give to healthcare when the drug companies pay for so much of their operations. But in any case, you have in this country every year tens of thousands of people who die unnecessarily because they don't get to the doctor on time. Right? And many other people suffer. Many people end up in the emergency room. It costs Medicaid, in many cases, 10 times more to treat somebody at an emergency room as opposed to a community health center. Is that pretty crazy? It's crazy. All right? So I think our goal should be, and this is really not a radical goal because it exists all over the rest of the world, for God's sakes, and that is guarantee health care to all people, have a strong primary health care system so that when you're sick, you go to the doctor, you get the initial care that you need so you don't get sicker. Okay? And then the other thing we have to do is have the courage to take on the drug companies. And again, putting this into a moral perspective, there are people who die in this country because they can't get the medicine that is easily available. They just can't afford it. We have gotten in Congress letters from oncologists who tell us that their cancer patients just cannot afford the medicine that's out there that is needed to save their lives. There's a new drug, a very good drug that came out, the hepatitis C. You know how much it costs? $1,000 a pill.
Wow.
So what the drug companies do is it's a market game. They will get as much as they possibly can. Oh, and if, by the way, you have to die because you can't afford it, that's not part of their business model. That is, again, insane and immoral. The companies, and by the way, in the midst of all of this, top 5 drug companies last year made $50 billion in profits. Deal with that issue. Is it moral for drug companies to making billions in profit and people die or suffer because they cannot afford the product that these companies produce?
No.
We have got to also, when we deal with the economy and we deal with poverty, got to have, I think, a very simple position, and that is if you work 40 hours a week in America, you don't live in poverty. That means raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, let me give you an example of some really exciting things that are happening. And I want you all to think about it because this is implicit in what this whole campaign is about. If we were here in this room 5 years ago, and somebody jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, the $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a starvation wage. And everyone would say, yeah, that's right. And we got to raise that minimum wage, says that woman, to $15 an hour. Everybody would have looked at her and said, you're nuts. You want to go from $7.25 to $15 an hour. You want to more than double the minimum wage. You're crazy. You're too radical. You're too extreme. That would have been the response. But what happened over the last 5 years? You tell me, what happened?
Minimum wage has changed in some
How
states.
so? Why is it changing?
Because people want it to change.
Because fast food workers went out on the streets. I'll never forget, I was in Detroit, Michigan, a year and a half ago. And I talked to young people there. Not so young, actually, they're kids, in their 20s. Working 3 jobs at McDonald's at $7.25 an hour. They can't even get 40 hours a week. $7.25 times 20 hours. You get on a bus because you can't afford a car. You go to your next McDonald's, get on a bus, go to your next McDonald's. And what people were saying, sorry, we can't live like that. And then what happened is people began to nod their heads and say, yeah, you're right. And then in Seattle, they raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. They did it in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And in California, and here you do it in New York over a period of time. That's how change comes about. 5 years ago, that would have seemed impossible. Today, if I have anything to say about it, and I think we're going to win this, the Democratic National Convention will adopt a platform that says $15 an hour. That's a victory we are seeing with our own eyes right now. Give you another example of change that you have helped make possible in this campaign. 3 years ago, virtually every Republican wanted to cut Social Security, and a number of Democrats, including a very, very, very high-level Democrat whose name I will not mention, for reasons that he would explain to you, not because he wanted to, he thought he had to, supported some cuts in Social Security. But you know what happened? We rallied the American people. And in our campaign, we said, you're not going to cut Social Security, you're going to expand Social Security. And guess what happened? It turns out that now Democrats, and I can tell you a story someday, over a beer or two, we were hours away, literally hours away. I know the day, I know the time, where we turned around cuts to Social Security. Okay? And now a majority of Democrats many of whom would have supported 3 years ago cuts to Social Security. You know what they're saying? Expand Social Security. Keystone Pipeline, hey, what a great idea. Turns out that many of you and people all over this country, in fact in Nebraska, where the pipeline was going right through, the woman who led the opposition to that pipeline, the woman who is now, that woman is now the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party, a supporter of ours. So 2 years ago, she was out there in the wilderness opposing the pipeline. Today, she is chair of the Democratic Party in that state. Trade issues, the same thing. We have an element in the Democratic Party, and certainly almost all Republicans, not all, who tell us how great unfettered free trade is. Oh, isn't it great? Well, it turns out that most Americans, especially working people, do not think it's such a great idea to see their jobs go to China or to Vietnam or other low-wage countries. I was in Indiana a few months ago, talking to workers there who work for United Technologies, major profitable corporation. Shut down 2 plants, Carrier, air conditioner. Shut down 2 plants in Indiana, 2,000 jobs as I recall. Went to Monterrey, going to Monterrey, Mexico, $3 an hour, going to pay their workers there. Well, people in Indiana didn't think that was such a great idea. And the American people are now coming around. We have a new view about the TPP. And as we speak, I hope that today or tomorrow, not sure that it'll happen, but we're going to fight for it, that making sure that the TPP does not get to the floor of the Congress is part of the Democratic. And when we talk about the economy, we have to also always, don't be ashamed of it, people come up to you as you go out and you talk about wanting to do A, B, and C, and people say, well, that's a great idea, how are you going to pay for it? Well, how you're going to pay for it is, among other things, demanding that the wealthiest people and largest corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. I think that we need to rebuild our infrastructure. It's our roads and our bridges and our water systems and our rail system and so forth. We can create 13 million good-paying jobs through $1 trillion investment. We can get that $1 trillion by eliminating the loophole that allows corporations to stash their money in the Cayman Islands and other places. I think it is not only economic issues that we've got to be concerned about, it is issues of criminal justice. Same thing as healthcare. Okay, same thing. Right now, we tolerate a situation where in inner cities all over this country, you have youth unemployment rates of 30, 40, 50% for high school graduates. Often African American kids, Latino kids, 30, 40, 50%. Well, if a kid can't go out and get a job, and a kid hangs out on street corners, bad things can happen. It makes, to my mind, a lot more sense for us to invest in those kids in jobs and education. Keep them in school. Give them the mentoring that they need, the attention they need. Make sure that they're earning a paycheck. If they're earning a paycheck, the likelihood of them getting into drugs or self-destructive behavior is much, much less. By the way, when you do that, you not only think about the lives that are being destroyed. Right now, we have 2.2 million people in jail, more than any other country on earth. Think about those lives rotting away at a cost of $80 billion a year. I think we could spend that $80 billion in a lot more constructive ways, keeping people out of jail.
Yes.
differentiates our campaign from all the other campaigns is that we have understood from day one that to bring about real change, it's good to talk about wanting to do this, wanting to do that, but what we understand is that you're going to have to take on the very, very powerful people for whom the current economy is working just great. If you are the pharmaceutical industry, you got no problem. Things are going great. You're the fossil fuel industry, so what if you're destroying the planet? Your job is just to make money. And the same thing is true even more so with Wall Street. This is an issue that we have got to deal with. Because finance is the grease that runs the economy. That's how the economy runs. And what we have got to recognize is that when you have so few banks that have so much wealth and so much power, banks that operate by and large in fraudulent, illegal ways, that we do have to break them up.
Break them up.
Break them up.
Break them up.
Very few people will talk about that because you're taking on the most powerful entity in America. Limitless supply of money. But we have to address that issue. All right, I don't want to go on forever. It's a beautiful day out there. Let me just tell you where we are and what I want to do. Right now, to be very frank with you, we are talking to the Clinton campaign to try to determine whether or not they can come up with some very serious proposals which will help us transform America. Whether it will happen or not remains a good question. I don't know. We are working with them right now. All right, number two. What we are trying to do also is to come up with the most progressive platform that the Democrats have ever had. And a platform is a piece of paper. That's what it is. It doesn't mean anything. But what we have got to do is demand and make certain, and this is where all of us have got to do that that platform becomes part of the Democratic Congress's agenda. Not just words. And thirdly, and most importantly, actually, some of you, I don't know if you watched, I gave a speech last Thursday, we live streamed the speech.
Yep.
And one of the things that I ask of people is I said, look, we need to have good people participating in politics at every level, from the school board on up. We had no idea how many people would respond to that call. And it went out, we said, please get back to BernieSanders.com/win, W-I-N. You know what? 20,000 people in the last week responded. These were, I think, mostly people who were prepared to run for office, and others who said, well, I don't want to run, but I want to help people in my community run for office. So let's talk about that one for a moment. And let me start off with a confession. I ran for mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont in 1981. If I had known how little I knew about municipal government, I never would have run. So I was arrogant and cocky and I ran. And I won by 10 votes. And I had a very steep learning curve, let me tell you. All right, but here is the point. And by the way, my experience in municipal government before that is I went to one city council meeting and I fell asleep at the meeting. It was the most boring meeting I ever saw in my life. Sure, I fell asleep. That was my whole experience in city government. But I was too dumb to know any better, and I actually ran for office. So, my point is, I have talked to people. You know, I've talked to a lot of people. People say, well, yes, it's true, I have a PhD in education. I've read 18,000 books. I don't think I'm prepared to serve on the school board. I don't know enough. You got to get over that. You got to get over that. All right? Nobody knows everything. Trust me. I'm the United States Senate. I can confirm that. Nobody knows. Many of my colleagues know a lot less than you would think. But here's the point, you can learn, and there are a lot of other great people there to help you. You can't be intimidated. One of the things the system does in so many ways is it intimidates us and tells us we can't do that. So what we need is people to be standing up, running for school board, and we need other people to be helping them win. And we need people to be running for city council, for mayor, for state legislature. We need good people with strong progressive ideas. And we are prepared to try to help you. And we have millions and millions of names. One of the things that we're doing right now is we have given support to a number, can't remember exactly how many, but a number of candidates running for Congress, running for state legislature. We help them raise money. We're giving them some help.
Teach out.
That's one. And we are providing them the support they need to win. We want to help you also. So I would hope that people here will give real thought to figure out, everybody, has a different interest. Some of you may be interested in education, others, in city politics or whatever it may be, city government. But think about the role that you can play and jump into it and ask your friends and family to help you. It doesn't, especially at lower levels, doesn't take a whole lot of money to do that. Doesn't take a whole lot of expertise. You're smart, you can learn that stuff. How you get on the ballot, how you knock on doors, the kind of literature you need, the kind of website that you need, you can figure those things out. But my message today is that we need all over this country thousands and thousands of good people to jump into the political process, and we are prepared to try to work with you to make that happen. Ultimately, that is what the political revolution is about, and we're already having good success. Out in California, there's a woman running for the state senate there, and the state senate in California represents 1.5 times the entire population of the state of Vermont. Nobody thought she would do well, and yet she came in first place in the primary. Okay, let me take a few questions. That's my speech. And the speech is simply this. The political revolution is you. It's not just an election once every 2 years or once every 4 years. We owe it to our children, to our parents, to everybody here, to create the kind of nation that we can become. And in terms of climate change, let me tell you something. We are fighting for the future of the entire planet. Not of Albany, not of New York, of the entire planet. Okay, just a few questions, because we've got to hit the road. Yes, sir. Stand up, give us your name, and what's on your mind.
My name is Kyle. I was wondering what your thoughts were on Jill Stein and if you would ever consider running with her.
Well, right now, I made a commitment. As you know, I'm the longest serving independent in the history of the United States. But when I began this campaign, I made a promise that I would stick within the Democratic. You're going around and you're asking for people's votes, so that's the promise that I will keep. But what you raise is the interesting question, and that is whether the Democratic Party is in fact capable of opening its doors. But if it's not, then you can rethink those issues. But what I'm giving right now, and we are succeeding in some states, and some states we're not. But I can tell you, having been to 46 states in this country, some states where the Democratic establishment are very decent people who understand that it is common sense to want to bring young people and working people into the party, and they are welcoming people. There are other states where they really are slamming the door. And you're going to have to break that door down. But, you've asked a good question. Where I am right now is where I am. But in years to come, that will depend on what the Democratic Party becomes. Are they prepared to stand up to the big money interest? Are they prepared to welcome young people and bold ideas into the party? That remains to be seen. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Sanders, I want you to thank the veteran at that diner who said he would help you become president because you help veterans. And I want to thank your wife for tagging on now with you because you do help veterans.
Let me just say a word on that, and thank you very much. I'm sorry, your name is?
Gloria Noor.
What Gloria was mentioning is...
Served in Desert Storm.
Thank you. Gloria says touches on a whole lot of issues. I think what she is talking about is my wife, Jane, who I think ends up being a better campaigner than I am. She's home with the grandchildren right now. But what happened, she was kind of reluctant for very obvious reasons to want to get involved in this thing. And, she was thinking about it. We're going around and around on it. And one day we were having breakfast at Denny's in South Burlington, Vermont. And a veteran came up to our table and said, sorry, I didn't want to disturb you. I just wanted to thank the senator very much for the kind of help that he gave me and so forth and so on. And my wife started crying. She said, okay, you have to do it. So, and I just want to say to everybody, I'm the former chair of the Veterans Committee. And in that capacity, it was only a 2-year term as the Republicans took control, but I learned more than I probably ever wanted to learn about the cost of war. And what is very troubling is you see these guys on TV, many of my colleagues, often Republicans, they want to go to war with a different country every other day. And yet they don't talk about the consequences of war, which are, you know how many people died in war, 6,700 or so died in Iraq and Afghanistan. What you don't know is that 500,000 came home with PTSD or traumatic brain injury. You don't know about the children who will never see their father, the divorces that have taken place, the inability of people to go out earning a living. You don't know about those things, but those are things that are taking place today. And a lot of suffering is out there. And I have always been very proud to have the support of veterans who, more than any other people, do understand the cost of war and do understand that war should be the last response, not the first.
Yes, Aaron Mayer, National President of the Sierra Club. Clean energy question. How you doing, brother? Right now, we have the capacity with offshore wind to shut down most nuclear power, in fact, if not all nuclear power in the Eastern Seaboard. We want to know what your support for clean energy, but also for just transition, because as we push for a clean energy future, there's the false narrative that we must trade off union jobs in order to have clean energy. Right now in Mississippi, Nissan, Renault are building automobiles, the Leaf, with non-unionized labor and a right-to-work rules. How are we going to, push the Democratic Party platform for just transition, but also, as I say, roll back right-to-work and push for anti-right-to-work legislation?
You've asked me a lot of questions there. This guy's a pro, so he got it all into his 2 minutes. All right, number one, let me broaden your question and tell you, as I suggested a moment ago, please understand that what the scientists, the people who have most studied the issue are now telling us is actually they made a mistake. They underestimated the severity of the climate change crisis. Not that they overestimated it, they underestimated it. It is worse. Think about this for a second. When you talk about climate, the scientists talk about it over periods of thousands or millions of years. We are seeing changes in climate with our own eyes in our own lifetimes. All right? What's happening out right now, this week, California, Arizona, what do you got? Temperatures 110, 120 degrees, forest fires. We are seeing at a level we have never seen it before. I talked to the senator from Florida the other day. Miami Beach, roads right by the ocean now, under 6 inches of water every so often. We're seeing rising sea levels, acidification of the ocean. We are seeing the dangers of climate change right now, and it is only getting worse. What I believe we have got to do is look at climate change like it was an enemy attack, and we got to respond accordingly. And that means we have to marshal all of our resources to break away from fossil fuel, to move to wind, to move to solar, to move to geothermal. And we can do that. We can do that in a relatively short period of time if we're prepared to invest. And you know what the irony is? We end up saving money later on. We save money in terms of cutting people's fuel bills because you're not dependent on oil. Right now in Puerto Rico, a sunny island, which has enormous economic problems right now, they have almost no solar at all. They have to transport oil to Puerto Rico. That is insane. Now the good news, as you know, is we're beginning, despite the opposition of Republicans and the fossil fuel industry, in Wyoming right now. They are looking at the largest wind farm in the entire world. There is no reason why we cannot make sure that every home in this country gets the money they need as a loan. We're going to lend you $20,000, $30,000 to install solar. Your electric bill goes down, you're going to repay that loan, and then you're going to have free electricity for the rest of your life. And we're going to build those solar panels here in the United States of America. This is not some kind of brilliant idea that nobody ever thought of. The opposition comes from the fossil fuel industry, who actually, in states like New Mexico, and Nevada, in Nevada, are trying to make it harder for people to get solar, if you can believe it. Okay. So, and you know, in terms of right to work, I have probably the strongest pro-union record in the United States Congress, and obviously. Let me get to some of the back there. Yes, stand up, please.
First, I'd like to thank you for coming here. My question was, what advice do you have for young people who have a passion for politics and potentially want to pursue careers in politics and political and public service?
This is my advice, okay? I don't like the word passion for politics. What I prefer is, and you've got to go into your own heart on this one, passion for justice. Okay?
We almost literally did that. We took on an entire establishment, which, by the way, to answer the question, was a Democratic party. And we pushed them aside. We brought hundreds and hundreds of people into the political process. We started programs for young people, for old people, for women, in the environment, for the arts. It was an extraordinary experience. So much excitement, so much energy. All right, it was a lot of fun. But the main thing you have to do, don't do it if you're just thinking about a career. You follow what I'm saying? Think about it as a mechanism, one way that you can bring change to this world. And if that's what you want, go for it and have the guts to stand up and fight for what you believe. We're going to Syracuse to see if we can get somebody elected.